Welcome to Crime Maze. In this video we are going to talk about the Murdaugh murders, what to know about the South Carolina mystery. Before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to Crime Maze channel for future updates. The unsolved murders of a lawyer's wife and son have rekindled interest in 3 other recent fatalities. Alex Murdaugh appeared in court on Thursday in Varnville, South Carolina, for a bond hearing after surrendering to face insurance fraud and other allegations. A mother and her son were murdered in an unsolved case. Millions of dollars have been taken. There are new inquiries into a catastrophic boat crash and a fatal fall by a housekeeper. The mystery surrounding a lawyer and his family in South Carolina have only grown more tragic and complex, resulting in multiple arrests, unexpected twists, and intricate speculations, despite the fact that many more aspects of the case remain unresolved. The Murdaugh family, whose members have held significant legal posts in the state's southern region for almost a century, is at its heart. On June 7, Alex Murdaugh, a lawyer whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all served as the state's top prosecutor, returned home late one night to discover his wife and one of their 2 boys murdered to death. Their murders remain unsolved, and the situation has only become more perplexing since then. Mr. Murdaugh ended up in handcuffs after concocting a bizarre scheme to stage his own suicide to look like a murder and being charged with stealing millions of dollars from a settlement fund. And the initial investigation has spawned several more into 3 previous deaths in close proximity to the family. Here's what you need to know. What happened in the first Murdaugh assassinations? Mr. Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, 52, and their son Paul, a 22-year-old junior at the University of South Carolina, were killed in a shooting that shook the state's Lowcountry region, where the family had formed its legal dynasty. The Murdaugh murders became well known as a result of the assassinations. The attack has been kept under wraps, and no arrests have been made. When Mr. Murdaugh returned to the family's remote house in Islandton, a rural hamlet some 65 miles west of Charleston, he discovered their bodies. Mr. Murdaugh claimed he arrived home and found their deaths on the ground out at my kennel in an audio recording of his 911 call, which he made just after 10 p.m. Mr. Murdaugh told the dispatcher, "I've gone up to it now, and it's nasty." He claimed that neither his wife nor his son were breathing and pleaded with the first responders to act quickly. "Do they appear to be close, ma'am?" Officers with the Colleton County Sheriff's Office located multiple shot casings and called a tow truck business to the location, according to reports. They also claimed to have searched for security cameras in nearby homes and businesses. However, the heavily censored police records make no mention of whether they located any. Mr. Murdaugh and his counsel have categorically denied any participation in his wife's and son's deaths. Why was Alex Murdaugh detained the first time, and how was he shot? Alex Murdaugh, 53, was forced to resign from his family law firm, P.M.P.D., named after the initials of its partners nearly 3 months after his wife and son were killed, after firm leaders claimed Mr. Murdaugh had misappropriated millions of dollars in client and firm funds, which his lawyers have not denied. Mr. Murdaugh contacted 911 the next day, September 4, to report that he had been shot in the head on the side of a rural road not far from his home. He was shot by someone who drew up behind him while he was investigating a flat tire on his car, and he first claimed that he was shot by someone who pulled up beside him as he was inspecting a flat tire on his car. However, the plot quickly unraveled. Mr. Murdaugh quickly revealed that he had asked one of his distant cousins to kill him. Mr. Murdaugh's lawyer said that he devised the scheme to make his suicide appear to be a murder because he mistakenly believed that his life insurance policy would not cover him if he died by suicide. He had hoped to leave a $10 million inheritance to his older son, Buster. Mr. Murdaugh published a statement 2 days after the incident, apologizing to his family, friends, and co-workers and announcing that he was entering treatment. His attorneys claimed that he had been addicted to oxycodone for years, and that his usage of the painkiller had intensified following the deaths of his wife and kid. Mr. Murdaugh's law license has been suspended, and his law company has filed a lawsuit against him for the money they claim he stole. Mr. Murdaugh and his cousin, Curtis Edward Smith, 61, were both arrested as part of his plot to have his cousin kill him. Mr. Smith was charged with severe assault, suicide attempt assistance, and insurance fraud. Mr. Smith told the New York Times that he did not shoot Mr. Murdaugh and that the revolver went off as he seized his arm to prevent him from shooting himself. On September 16, Mr. Murdaugh surrendered to police and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a fake police report, all of which are felonies. Mr. Murdaugh wept behind a face mask as he sat handcuffed and in a jail jumpsuit in a Hampton County courtroom as one of his lawyers detailed his fall from grace. He was released from jail without having to lose any money and was sent to a rehabilitation clinic until October, when he was arrested again and charged with defrauding his former housekeeper's sons of millions of dollars. How did a Murdaugh housekeeper pass away in 2018? Gloria Satterfield, who had worked as a nanny and cleaner for Alex Murdaugh and his family for more than 20 years, fell at their home in February 2018 and died a few weeks later from her injuries. Mr. Murdaugh connected her two adult sons to a lawyer who he promised would look after them after her funeral. But the sons claimed in a recent lawsuit that they were unaware that the lawyer, Corey Fleming, was a close friend of Mr. Murdaugh's. Mr. Fleming struck a $4.3 million settlement with Mr. Murdaugh and his insurers, which was meant to transfer roughly $2.8 million to Ms. Satterfield's boys after lawyers' expenses. But the sons said in September that they had only recently learned of the transaction and had never received any money. Mr. Murdaugh was detained again in October, this time at an Orlando detox center, and charged with 2 counts of acquiring property by false pretenses, a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison, in connection with the missing settlement payments. Prosecutors said Mr. Murdaugh set up a bank account in the name of a financial consultant firm and persuaded Mr. Fleming to pay him more than $3 million in settlement funds in the form of checks made out to the firm. Then, according to the charges, he deposited the funds into his own bank account and used the money to pay off a $100,000 credit card debt and write himself checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mr. Fleming has admitted to making mistakes while representing Ms. Satterfield's boys, but insists that he, too, was tricked by Mr. Murdaugh and misled into believing the money would be deposited in a trust for the sons. Mr. Murdaugh was ordered to be kept in jail as he awaits trial on the allegations on October 19, though the court said he would reconsider setting a bond amount after Mr. Murdaugh completed a psychiatric evaluation. The police are also investigating the reason of Ms. Satterfield's death in addition to the settlement. Her family had long assumed that she had tripped over their dogs and fallen down the front steps of their home, based on the Murdaugh family's accounts, but the local coroner was never notified of her death, and no autopsy was ever performed. Her death certificate also lists her death as natural, which contradicts an accidental fall. Paul Murdaugh, the son who was killed, was out on bail at the time of his death after being charged in 2019 with drunkenly wrecking a boat in an accident that killed one of his passengers, Mallory Beach, 19 years old, and injured several others. Since his death, documents and recordings have been published, raising doubts about whether the cops were negligent or treated him unfairly. Shortly after the crash, one of the boat's 6 passengers told the Department of Natural Resources officer that Paul Murdaugh was driving the boat, but the officer noted in a report that the passenger indicated he wasn't sure who was driving. The South Carolina Attorney General's office is still looking into the crash, which resulted in Paul Murdaugh being charged with boating under the influence causing death and 2 counts of boating under the influence causing grave bodily injury, all felonies. The boat disaster and the double homicide have not been linked by the authorities. 2 of Alex Murdaugh's brothers spoke on ABC's Good Morning America in June, saying that Paul, their nephew, had been receiving threatening threats since being charged in the boat disaster. In one of the few public statements from the family, And what about the young man who was discovered beside a road in 2015? The death of the housekeeper isn't the only one that has been re-examined. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division stated in June, just weeks after Maggie and Paul Murdaugh died, that it was reopening an investigation into the death of Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old man whose body was discovered on a road approximately 10 miles from the Murdaugh residence. There has never been a full explanation for his death, and no arrests have been made. Initially, it was thought to be a probable shooting, but it was later determined to be a hit-and-run. According to police records, Mr. Smith ran out of petrol on the side of the road several miles from where his body was discovered. The police have not accused the Murdaugh family of involvement in the case, and they have not stated what prompted them to launch an inquiry into Mr. Smith's death during their Murdaugh investigation. What is the Murdaugh family's power? The legal dynasty of the Murdaughs dates back to Randolph Murdaugh, who maintained a one-man law firm before being chosen as the first lead prosecutor for a 5-county district covering 200 square miles in 1920. He held the role for 2 decades before dying in a train accident. Then his son, Randolph Murdaugh Jr., sometimes known as Buster, took over his father's position as solicitor of the 14th Circuit. When the younger Murdaugh resigned after 46 years, his son, Randolph Murdaugh III, who was Alex Murdaugh's father, was elected and served until 2006. Alex Murdaugh never campaigned for prosecutor, but he did volunteer as a prosecutor and occasionally assisted his father with cases. According to the Island Packet newspaper, he was officially dismissed from that voluntary job in September. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.